Big clubs rig games and refs decide titles. May 6, 2009, Stamford Bridge, Chelsea vs Barcelona, Champions League semi-final, second leg. Chelsea take the lead through a stunning Michael Essien volley. They're 45 minutes from a second consecutive Champions League final. And then the evening falls apart. Florent Malouda goes down in the box after a challenge from Dani Alves. No penalty, the foul is given outside the area. Didier Drogba is pulled back by Eric Abidal. No penalty. Gerard Piqué handles the ball. No penalty. Samuel Eto'o blocks a shot with his arm. No penalty. 4 appeals, 4 rejections. Andres Iniesta scores in the 93rd minute. Barcelona go through on away goals. Drogba loses his mind. "It's a disgrace!" he screams into the camera. "It's a f***ing disgrace!" Referee Tom Henning Overbo later admitted he made mistakes that night. He required a police escort to leave England. Death threats followed him home to Norway. His career at the top level effectively ended. Chelsea fans still believe they were robbed, and in some sense they were, not by conspiracy, but by one man having one terrible night under impossible pressure. Here's what the conspiracy theory misses. Overbo wasn't corrupt, he was overwhelmed. Millions watching globally, split-second decisions that would define narratives for years. Data consistently shows referees don't favor big clubs, they favor home teams. Across every league, every season, every decade, home sides receive more favorable decisions. Not because officials are corrupt, because cognitive psychology makes bias unavoidable when a stadium is trying to intimidate you. The perception that Manchester United or Real Madrid get preferential treatment comes from a statistical illusion. Big clubs attack more. They spend more time in the opposition third. They create more situations in and around the penalty area. More situations mean more decisions. More decisions mean more opportunities for favorable outcomes. If you take 60 shots inside the box across a season and your opponent takes 30, you're going to win more penalties. Not because the referee likes you, but because probability works in your favor. Games aren't rigged. They're influenced by human psychology, operating under conditions no training can fully prepare you for. And honestly, most referees get it right far more often than they get it wrong. The mistakes feel enormous because we remember them. The hundreds of correct calls disappear between the chaos. Possession equals control. December 1st, 2022. Qatar. Spain vs Japan. World Cup group stage. At halftime, Spain had recorded 83% possession. They'd completed 530 passes. Japan had managed just over 100. The game felt like a training exercise. Spain were up 1-0. They looked utterly dominant. 48 minutes, Japan equalize. 51 minutes, Japan take the lead. Final score, Japan 2, Spain 1. Japan finished with 18% possession, the lowest by any winning team at a World Cup since records began in 1966. Spain completed over 1,000 passes. Japan completed 228. It didn't matter. In 2012, Celtic beat Barcelona 2-1 in the Champions League, while holding under 20% of the ball. Barcelona made over 950 passes. Celtic made 166. Possession guarantees nothing. Barcelona under Guardiola changed how a generation understood football. Keep the ball, control the game, defend by not letting opponents touch it. The philosophy was elegant. It was also context-dependent in ways that got lost in translation. What made Barcelona's possession lethal wasn't retention, it was location. They kept the ball in positions that created progressive options. Movement pulled opponents apart. Possession served a purpose beyond the statistic. When others copied the metric without understanding the principle, possession became disconnected from territory. Teams circulated in their own half, completing passes that went nowhere. Opponents adapted quickly. If a team wants the ball but doesn't know what to do with it, let them have it. Drop compact. Invite them into congested areas. Counter with speed. Japan didn't need the ball to beat Spain. They needed moments. 2 substitutes, 3 minutes, and 1,000 Spanish passes meant nothing. Control in football isn't about who has the ball. It's about who has the space and what happens when opportunity arrives. Football is ruined by money. This is the comfortable narrative. Once upon a time, football was pure. Then money arrived and corrupted everything. Clubs became corporations, players became brands, supporters became customers. The soul of the game was sold. The problem with this story is that money has always been central to football. The only thing that changed is who controls it. In 1905, Middlesbrough paid Sunderland £1,000 for Alf Common, the first 4-figure transfer in history. Newspapers called it obscene and the death of competitive sport. Parliament debated whether transfer fees should be banned entirely. A century later, we're having the same conversation with different numbers. When the Premier League launched in 1992, the average player earned £75,000 a year. The league's highest-paid star, John Barnes, took home £10,000 a week, a figure that made headlines. Today, the combined wage bill for all 20 clubs exceeds £3 billion. But revenue increased faster. Television rights went from £191 million to over £5 billion. Clubs weren't spending beyond their means, they were spending exactly what the market would bear. When television money arrived, it didn't flow equally. The biggest clubs negotiated the biggest shares. Performance bonuses compounded existing advantages. Relegation clauses created existential fear that pushed smaller clubs toward financial recklessness. The gap widened not because of capitalism, but because of regulatory failure. In Germany, the 50+1 rule prevents single investors from controlling clubs. In Spain, until recently, clubs negotiated television deals individually, meaning Real Madrid and Barcelona captured revenue that would have been shared elsewhere. In England, parachute payments create perverse incentives, distorting an entire league pyramid. These aren't moral failures. They're structural choices made by the people who govern football. And yet, Leicester still won the league. In 2015-16, their entire squad cost less than a single Manchester City player. Their wage bill sat in the bottom 5 of the Premier League. Bookmakers offered 5,000-to-1 odds, the longest for any major sporting event in history. Jamie Vardy was playing non-league football 4 years earlier. Riyad Mahrez cost £400,000. N'Golo Kante was signed from Ken for £5.6 million. They won the league by 10 points. Atalanta were 90 seconds from a Champions League semi-final on a fraction of Serie A giants' budgets. Girona qualified for Europe, making neutrals fall in love with them. Bayer Leverkusen went an entire Bundesliga season unbeaten. The system is flawed. The regulations failed. But football keeps finding ways to produce miracles anyway. The sport is more resilient than the institutions running it. Money didn't ruin football. Poor governance created problems that football keeps solving in spite of itself. Transfers are simple. Every window, fans watch their club miss out on obvious targets and ask the same question: why is this so hard? The player wants to come. We want to sign him. Just pay the money. It feels like it should be straightforward. It almost never is. Modern transfers operate at the intersection of sporting logic, financial engineering, and timing that has nothing to do with football. The gap between club identifies target and player signs contract is filled with obstacles most fans never see. Start with agents. The biggest agencies don't represent individuals, they represent portfolios. When a club signs a high-profile client, that agency gains leverage. Conversations begin about other players on their books. Package deals emerge. The initial signing creates secondary obligations that have nothing to do with squad needs. Then there's financial timing. Profit and sustainability rules force clubs to balance books across specific accounting periods. A player might be available, affordable, and perfect, but the purchase would breach financial thresholds that season. So the club waits, pays more later. or finds a different target whose contract structure fits the spreadsheet better. Wages complicate everything further. It's not just what a club pays, it's how that salary affects the dressing room. Sign one player on £200,000 a week and suddenly 3 others want new contracts. The true cost of a transfer isn't the fee. It's the ripple effect across an entire wage structure. Image rights add another layer. When a player joins a major club, their commercial value extends beyond football. Marketability, social media reach, sponsorship compatibility. Clubs increasingly factor in revenue generation when assessing targets. Most deals that collapse don't fall apart over football disagreements. They fail because one variable in a 10-variable equation didn't align. And yet, sometimes the chaos produces magic. Clubs stumble into players they never targeted who become legends. Financial constraints force creative solutions that outperform unlimited spending. Transfers aren't simple. They're messy, political, and shaped by forces that have nothing to do with what happens on the pitch. Modern players are softer. Watch any Premier League match and you'll see it. A player goes down, clutching their face after minimal contact. Another rolls around before sprinting back seconds later. A third surrounds the referee, screaming. The conclusion seems obvious. Modern footballers are soft. They dive, they complain, they lack mental fortitude. This narrative requires ignoring everything about how the game has changed physically. In the early 1970s, Tom Riley's pioneering study at Everton found players covered approximately 8.7 kilometers per match. Today, that figure exceeds 10, often pushing toward 11 for midfielders. The increase isn't jogging, it's high-intensity sprinting. Research from the University of Gothenburg found that high-intensity running in the Premier League increased by 50% in just 10 years, between 2000 and 2010. The tempo has accelerated dramatically. Ball speed, movement speed, transition speed, every metric has climbed. What looked like comfortable possession in 1998 would be pressed into chaos today. Elite players now face 60 to 70 matches per season. Recovery windows have shrunk. Accumulated fatigue is constant. FIFPro's workload monitoring confirms that the most in-demand players routinely play 2 games per week for months at a time. What we're watching is the most athletic, most physically demanding version of football ever played. The fitness requirements would have broken previous generations. What about simulation? Technology changed the calculation. When VAR made every contact reviewable, players adapted. If going down increases your chance of winning a foul, going down becomes strategically rational. It's not weakness, it's intelligence. The players who played through anything often did so because alternatives didn't exist. Substitutes were limited. Medical understanding was primitive. Continuing injured wasn't toughness, it was necessity dressed as virtue. The game didn't get softer, it became faster, harder, and more demanding than anything that came before. The players got smarter about surviving it. That's not a weakness, that's evolution. If you're not elite by 18, you never will be. Football mythology obsesses over prodigies. The 16-year-old debut, the teenage sensation. The implication is clear. Miss the window by 18 and it's closed forever. This belief collapses under evidence. Jamie Vardy was playing non-league at 23, earning £30 a week while working in a factory making medical splints. At 25, he signed for Championship club Leicester City, his first professional contract. By 29, he'd won the Premier League and held the record for scoring in 11 consecutive top-flight matches. N'Golo Kante was playing in France's 9th tier at 19. At 21, he was still in the 3rd division. By 25, he'd won consecutive Premier League titles with 2 different clubs and would later lift the World Cup. Luka Modric was rejected by Hajduk Split for being too small and weak. Sent to Bosnia on loan at 18, he was told he'd never survive top-level football. He won the Ballon d'Or at 33. Didier Drogba didn't play top-flight football until he was 24. He retired as one of the greatest strikers of his generation. These aren't anomalies. They're how development actually works. Football evolves constantly. Tactical trends shift. Physical requirements change. New roles emerge that didn't exist a decade earlier. A player who doesn't fit the system at 18 might be perfect for what evolves by 25. The right coach at the right moment can unlock potential previous setups missed entirely. Position changes, new responsibilities, or simply getting chances that weren't available before. These shape careers more than teenage ability. There's survivorship bias in how we see prodigies. We remember those who succeeded young and assume that's the only path. We forget the majority who peaked early and faded. But here's what matters. The door never fully closes. Football keeps finding room for players who were overlooked, underestimated, or simply needed more time. Vardy wasn't a late bloomer because he developed slowly. He was a late bloomer because football hadn't found a place for what he could do yet. When it did, everything changed.
Football was better back in the day.
Your earliest football memory is probably from the mid-90s. Maybe it's Cantona chipping the keeper against Sunderland, that collar popped, arms spread wide. Maybe it's Zidane gliding past defenders like they weren't there. Maybe it's a local derby where someone got sent off before half-time and your dad told you that's just how football was. You remember when tackles were tackles, when players didn't roll around, when managers screamed from the touchline and nobody talked about controlling emotions, when football felt raw, physical, and real. Now you watch a centre-back get a yellow card for winning the ball cleanly. You watch players go down from shoulder contact. You watch VAR pause the game for 3 minutes to draw lines on a freeze frame. And something feels lost. This is the nostalgia myth. The belief that football used to mean something. That players bled for the badge. That the modern game has traded passion for paychecks and gamesmanship. It's a compelling story. It's also incomplete. In the 90s and early 2000s, pitches were inconsistent at best. Mud, uneven surfaces, and unpredictable bounces shaped outcomes as much as tactics did. What we remember as physicality was often compensation for surfaces that made technical football and passing impossible. The average professional career lasted 8 years, not because players were tougher, because medical science was primitive, rehabilitation protocols barely existed, and injuries that modern sports medicine can repair in months ended careers overnight. We romanticize the brutality because we only remember the survivors. And those sacred loyalties. The Bosman ruling in 1995 changed everything. Before that, clubs could demand transfer fees for players even after contracts expired. If no one paid, you were stuck. Wages cut, career frozen. Jean-Marc Bosman challenged this in court and won. The moment players could move freely, the market shifted. Economics moved faster than mythology. What fans actually mourn isn't football, it's scarcity. When you saw one live match a season, it became precious. When you see 3 every weekend without leaving your sofa, it becomes ordinary. Your childhood self experienced football as an event. Your adult self experiences it as content. But here's the thing, the football itself is better. The technique is sharper. The athletes are faster. The tactical variety is richer than anything the 90s produced. What we lost in rarity, we gained in quality. The game didn't get worse. Your relationship with it just changed.
Football is just about football. The complaint arrives predictably. A player takes a political stance. A club issues a social statement. Coverage extends beyond 90 minutes. Keep politics out of football. It's just a game. Focus on the pitch. The sentiment is understandable. The premise is historically incomplete. Football has never existed in isolation. From the moment it became a mass spectator event, the sport has reflected the societies hosting it. In 1978, Argentina hosted the World Cup while a military dictatorship was disappearing thousands of political opponents.
The main tournament stadium sat less than a kilometre from a concentration camp where prisoners could hear the crowds while they were tortured. The tournament was explicitly used to legitimize the regime, and FIFA let it happen. Football hadn't become political, it was always embedded in political reality. Club identities are cultural identities. Athletic Bilbao's Basque-only policy maintained for over a century. Celtic and Rangers, whose sectarian roots trace back to 19th century immigration and religious division. Barcelona as a vehicle for Catalan expression, especially during decades when speaking the language was banned everywhere except inside the stadium. These connections weren't invented by social media. They've existed for generations. What changed isn't football's relationship with society, it's visibility. Social media means every statement reaches millions instantly. Global broadcasting transforms local controversies into international stories. The boundary between football and everything else has dissolved. That boundary was always artificial. We maintained the illusion more easily when information moved slower. Football clubs are cultural institutions now. They reflect the communities supporting them. They carry weight extending beyond trophies and league positions. They matter to millions of people in ways that go far deeper than results. The sport carries more meaning than it used to, more responsibility, more complexity. That comes with complications, but it also comes with significance. Football didn't stop being about football. It became about more than football. Whether that's a loss or an evolution depends on what you want the game to be. Football is full of stories we tell ourselves. That the game was purer before money arrived. That referees decide titles. That players used to be tougher. Most of these myths aren't lies, they're incomplete pictures. Nostalgia filtering out the bad. Statistics creating illusions. Change being mistaken for decline. The game didn't get worse. It got different. Faster, richer, more complicated, more visible. And somehow, through all of it, football keeps producing moments that none of us can explain or predict. That's what makes it worth caring about.